My name is Elena Carter, and I learned young that in some families, love isn't unconditional, it's strategic. In ours, it was doled out like rations in a war zone, and none of it had my name on it. My older brother Ethan was the chosen one, the shining star, the boy who could do no wrong in the eyes of Linda and Ron Carter, our ever-proud parents. Ethan didn't just get praise, he got priority, always. The biggest slice of cake, the newest phone, the best seat in the car. And me, I was background noise, the helper, the placeholder, the daughter they remembered when dishes piled up or when they needed someone to compare Ethan to just to make him shine a little brighter. I still remember Christmas when I was 7 in our cramped Knoxville living room. The fake pine tree was lopsided and the heater was wheezing, but Ethan's joy made the whole house glow. He tore into the largest box like it was life or death and screamed when he saw the newest gaming console, something all his friends had wanted. Mom beamed, filming his reaction like it was some Oscar-worthy performance. I sat there legs crossed, hands still hoping maybe this year they had actually thought of me. My gift? A gray clearance rack t-shirt with a plumbing company's logo slapped across the chest. Tag still on $3.99. 2 sizes too big and 3 levels below basic. Mom gave me a smile laced with that condescending sweetness she'd perfected and said, "Sweetie, you should learn to be content. Ethan's older. He needs more important things." I forced a smile, sat in the corner, watched Ethan play the screen's glow bouncing off his thrilled face while I blinked fast, pretending my eyes weren't stinging. The holidays never got better. For Ethan's Sweet 16, they went all out a lakeside party at Cherokee Bluff Park, a live band barbecue station's fairy lights, and the grand finale. A brand new Ford parked under a giant red bow. Practically the whole neighborhood came. There were photos, speeches, hugs. My 16th, 2 friends, frozen pizza, dim living room light that made everything look sadder than it already was. My gift. A plain notebook and a cheap ballpoint pen. Not even the kind with a quote or a pretty cover. The kind companies hand out at job fairs. "You're practical," Dad said. "You don't need anything fancy." But Ethan, he got luxury without ever asking. When he went off to college, they paid every penny. Tuition dorm, even a monthly allowance for his mental wellness. Meanwhile, I got handed a stack of student loan applications and a sermon about being independent and not expecting handouts. No one asked if I had groceries. No one cared that I worked late-night shifts and skipped meals to keep the lights on. I used to believe foolishly that if I just worked harder, if I just kept being the good daughter, something would change. But by the time I walked across the stage with my degree, that fragile hope had already died. Ethan came home to a backyard celebration, confetti poppers, a towering cake, toasts from relatives. As the sun set over Ashland Hills, Mom and Dad handed him the keys to a starter home in the northern suburbs. He earned it, they said, after all his hard work. Me, I stepped into our faded dining room where only my parents sat. No cake, no fanfare, just a lukewarm fast food box and a white envelope. I thought maybe it held a check, something to help chip away at the debt that had swallowed my 20s. But inside a $2 scratch-off lottery ticket, just for fun. Mom chirped like it was some adorable family joke. "Maybe you'll hit it big." I looked up. Neither of them looked sorry. Dad just shrugged. "You know how it is. All our money went into Ethan's house." I smiled. The kind of smile you give when you're too tired to scream. Folded the ticket, tucked it into the pocket of my worn-out coat, and nodded. But inside, I wasn't angry. I was empty. Turns out, I was never part of their real plan. I wasn't their investment. I was their afterthought. And that night as I lay awake in my childhood bed for the last time, I realized something sharp and cold. If I wanted a place in this world, I would have to carve it out myself. No more waiting for anyone to hand it to me. After that silent dinner that passed for a graduation celebration, I packed up my life. Some worn clothes, a battered old laptop, and a chipped red suitcase that barely zipped. I left the house I'd grown up in, the house that always felt like it belonged to someone else. Not to me. Never to me. I rented a tiny studio apartment in downtown Knoxville where midnight traffic hummed like static and streetlights flickered over cracked sidewalks. The orange glow outside my window was harsh, but it was still warmer than the cold, clipped silence of my parents' house. The apartment was smaller than small, one single bed. A slanted desk with a leg that wobbled and an old electric stove that buzzed like it was trying to electrocute me. The pipes groaned when the weather turned cold, and I could hear every argument, every flush, every broken heart from the neighbors through the paper-thin walls. But for the first time in my life, it was mine. No one told me to smile more. No one compared me to Ethan. No one handed me discount clothes and expected gratitude in return. I breathed in that cheap, leaky air like it was freedom. I took whatever jobs I could get to survive. During the day, I worked as a marketing assistant at a small fading billboard company just off Magnolia Avenue. At night, I clocked in at a bakery by the city market, wiping counters, bagging pastries, hauling out heavy bags of flour and trash long after the streets emptied. I'd come home with blistered feet and flour in my hair, hands raw from bleach and fryer grease. But still, somehow, I felt lighter than I ever did under my parents' roof. My phone stayed mostly silent. The Carter family group chat was still active, but it might as well have been a shrine to Ethan. My mother sent photos of him grinning behind the wheel of his new car. Dad shared videos of Ethan and Claire, his girlfriend parasailing in the Keys with captions like, "Kid deserves the world." No one asked if I had food in my fridge. No one wondered if I was okay. One time I typed, "Hope everyone's doing well," just to remind them I existed. A few emojis. That was all I got. And in a way that felt worse than nothing at all, the scratch-off ticket they gave me in my graduation gift still sat in the kitchen drawer buried under loose coins, a broken rubber band, and a dried-out pen. I didn't touch it, not because I forgot, but because I remembered. Because it was exactly what they thought I was worth. A gamble, a joke, a vague chance. Sometimes when I walked by that drawer, I'd run my fingers along the wrinkled edge of the ticket, the way some people trace old scars. Then I'd shut it again, pretending I didn't care. But I did. I told myself I didn't need them, that I didn't crave their attention anymore, that I was used to being overlooked. But in the quietest hours when the city finally slept, I'd hear my mother's voice whisper like a curse in my ear, "Ethan needs more," and that single sentence would settle beneath my ribs like splinters. Then came a Friday night. Nothing extraordinary, just a small party at a coworker's apartment. I sat by the dessert table sipping flat soda and trying not to look like I wanted to leave. That's when Tasha Brooks from the creative team slid into the seat next to mine. She was one of those women who wore big earrings and even bigger confidence. I liked her. We started talking about work, the chaos of client deadlines, our shared annoyance at the vending machine always stealing change. Then casually, she tilted her head and asked, "Hey, how come I've never heard you talk about your family?" I hesitated. For half a second, I wanted to lie, say they were fine, say we were just distant. But instead, I exhaled and said the truth. Maybe because they never really saw me as part of it. Tasha didn't blink. She just nodded, like she'd been there too. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There were no violins, but something inside me cracked just a little. And that night when I got home and turned the key to my apartment, I didn't just toss my shoes aside and pass that drawer like always. I stopped, opened it, took out the lottery ticket with hands that didn't shake. I stared at it for a long while. Not because I hoped to win, but because I was tired of carrying the belief that I was worthless. I laid it gently on the table, uncapped a pen. Just then, my phone buzzed. I opened the family group chat, a new photo. Ethan and Claire standing in front of a house, arm around each other, beaming. Behind them, a handcrafted wooden sign that read, "Playground for our firstborn coming soon." Underneath, comment after comment. "So proud, Ethan's going to be a dad. Couldn't be happier." Not a single word to me. I laughed, but this time it wasn't bitter. It was quiet, resigned. I set the phone down, leaned forward, and started scratching the silver layer. No matter what it revealed, I was done waiting for someone to see me. It was time I saw myself. I could barely breathe as the numbers revealed themselves. My heart pounded so loud, it drowned out the world. I placed a hand against my chest, just to make sure I was still here, still conscious. My fingers trembled as I whispered each number under my breath, afraid that speaking them too loud might break the spell. 8, 14, 27, 33, 42, 56. I stared at the ticket, then at the screen. The bright flash of the Tennessee State Lottery website blinked back at me. Congratulations! You've won the jackpot! $134 million. I didn't move, I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just sat, frozen, like the whole apartment was holding its breath with me. The pen slipped from my hand and rolled onto the floor. I didn't even look down. I just kept staring at that ticket like it might catch fire. Like it already had. This couldn't be real. But it was. I hadn't dreamed it. I had really truly won. For a few minutes, I forgot where I was, who I was. I only had one question spinning in my mind. Now what? I didn't call anyone. There wasn't a single person in my life I could share this with without instantly regretting it. My family. Please, they wouldn't ask how I felt. They'd only ask how much I planned to give. I sat down at my old laptop and typed into the search bar, what to do when you win the lottery. Hundreds of links, dozens of checklists. I clicked the one from a reputable financial magazine. First line in bold. Don't tell anyone. Get a trustworthy advisor immediately. I made a list of names, the best-rated professionals in Charlotte. After a few hours of research, I chose one that felt right. Deborah Linford, a seasoned financial strategist with over 20 years of experience. Her office was on the 22nd floor of a sleek glass building downtown, all glass and silence. I almost didn't go. I stood outside the elevator for a solid 5 minutes, palms sweating. I wore my simplest black dress, tied my hair into a neat bun, and clutched my folder like it was armor. When I finally stepped in, the scent of peppermint tea hit me first. Then the soft hum of jazz and Deborah's calm, assured voice. Her eyes were warm but sharp, the kind that had seen everything missed. Nothing. She listened to me spill everything in a rush, my family, the ticket, the silence, the fear. When I finally stopped to breathe, she smiled and said, "This isn't magic, Elena. It's math. And we're going to make it work for you for the long term." In 3 hours, we built a plan. The prize would be claimed through a discreet LLC under a generic name. Deborah brought in a tax attorney and an investment manager. They worked like surgeons, precise and focused. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt safe. Not just safe, seen. Until the next day, the morning after our meeting, I opened my inbox and found something strange. An email. Subject saw your name on the LLC filing. From a private account I didn't recognize. The message was short. Interesting move. Quiet but not invisible. Some filings are public, sweetheart. You might want to double-check that. My stomach twisted. I checked the company records, and sure enough, one of the LLC's backup registration entries had been processed with a temporary email I once used. One connected to an old account Ethan had hacked in high school to reset my passwords as a joke. I immediately called Deborah. She was calm but firm. We'll fix it immediately. Within hours, they scrubbed the records, shifted the primary contact information, and rerouted everything through a legal proxy. But that email, that anonymous voice, it stayed with me. I didn't respond, but a part of me knew the clock had started ticking. Someone knew. Maybe Ethan, maybe someone else. But I wasn't the same girl who used to sit quietly in the corner. Let them come. Within 3 weeks, the full prize was processed. After taxes and legal shielding, I received the first transfer, $85 million, now tucked safely into accounts I controlled through the LLC. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like breathing after being underwater too long. The first thing I did, paid off every student loan, every credit card, cleared my name from every debt collector's database like I was erasing old scars. Then I moved out of the crumbling apartment with the hissing pipes and into a modest 2-bedroom home in Ashland Hills, tucked between crimson-leafed maple trees, quiet, unassuming mine. No mansion, no marble counters, no gold chandeliers. Just a gray hybrid Lexus, a sun-drenched kitchen, and a walk-in closet that didn't smell like mold. I didn't tell a soul. I kept my day job at the billboard office, not because I needed the money, but because I needed to stay grounded. I needed time to learn who I was when I wasn't scraping by. The only goodbye I allowed myself was to the bakery. I wrote a handwritten thank you to the owner, left a small check folded between the pages. Enough to help him expand his cake display and fix that broken oven light he always cursed at. It was the first goodbye I'd written that didn't sting. I framed the lottery ticket, not to brag, just to remember. Because that ticket didn't just change my life, it proved something I'd always suspected, but never dared believe. What surprised me most wasn't the freedom, it was the peace. Each morning in Ashland Hills, I brewed coffee in my sunlit kitchen, the smell curling through the air like comfort itself. Sparrows chirped outside the bay window, flitting through the maple trees I'd come to adore. I'd sit at the long granite island, open a novel, or sometimes just stare out over the dew-covered grass, doing nothing but being, no longer chasing anyone's approval, no longer waiting for the next blow. The lottery ticket now hung in a slim glass frame beside my writing desk. Not for display, not as a trophy, but as a private reminder. Sometimes all it takes is a single chance to rewrite your story, even if that chance comes wrapped in indifference and mockery. For the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone else to tell me I mattered. I had built that knowledge with my own hands. And this new life, it felt like a dream, but not the kind you shout about. The kind you guard, quietly, fiercely, like a secret no one gets to steal. I gave myself 3 months to adjust. On my final day at the billboard company, I brought in 2 boxes of cinnamon waffles and a lavender bouquet for the front desk. When they asked where I was going, I smiled and told them I'd been offered a freelance contract with a creative agency in Seattle. Nobody questioned it. I'd always been the dependable one, the one with quiet ambition and eyes a little too tired for her age. My exit didn't cause a ripple. A week later, I moved fully into my new home. A 2-story modern farmhouse with white siding and black shutters. The kind of place that felt grounded, intentional. The backyard stretched wide, ringed with trees that burst into color. Each fall, I filled it with silence and sunlight. A few neighbors made harmless jokes, unicorn stock, married a tech bro, crypto jackpot. I just smiled and said, I worked remotely for a European firm, the kind of vague that shuts doors. My car, a pearl white Tesla, registered under the LLC. My license plate read EC92. No one knew. It stood for Elena Carter, born in 1992. No one needed to. Every morning, I stood on the upstairs balcony with a steaming mug of hazelnut roast looking down the long tree-lined driveway. Sometimes I stayed there for an hour, breathing in the quiet. I started writing again. Not for money, not for clout, just because I could. Children's stories, ones I used to dream up when I was little and lonely, stories where overlooked girls found magic in ordinary things. With Deborah's help, I invested in a small indie publishing house and printed my first run under a pen name. On weekends, I joined watercolor classes in a converted barn down the road. I painted messy, imperfect things, lavender fields, paper boats, sad-eyed cats. And in every brushstroke, in every word I typed, there was something new, joy, my joy. No timelines, no comparison, no one asking, well, if Ethan can do it? I stayed off social media, no selfies, no updates. My life was finally mine. But rumors, they don't need permission to spread. It started with a message from Jenna, a girl I barely knew from my college dorm days. Elena, are you living in Ashland Hills now? I swear I saw your car in a neighborhood post and nearly screamed. My heart dropped. In that post, a photo of my Tesla parked beside the mailbox I had stupidly labeled E. Carter, the caption. What does our mysterious new neighbor do to afford all this free coffee for whoever finds out? I changed the mailbox that night, switched it to a number, re-registered every trace of my presence under the company name, but it was too late. The next day, 3 missed calls from Mom. I didn't answer. 2 days later, a text from my cousin Tyler. Heard you're living in Ashland Hills. Everyone's buzzing. Your mom thinks you hit it big. Asked if I knew anything. My stomach twisted. It had taken a brand new car and a house in a nice zip code for them to remember I existed. All those years, they couldn't be bothered to ask if I had dinner. Now they wanted details. I said nothing, but I knew then my invisibility was gone. That very morning while watering the lavender by the porch, I saw a black SUV crawl past my gate. Like a shark in shallow water, my breath caught. It slowed stop. Behind the wheel, Ethan. Passenger seat. Linda hair curled. Lipstick flawless. That look in her eyes. Curiosity, calculation, entitlement so familiar, I could have choked on it. I dropped low behind the nearest maple heart pounding in my ears. They stared at the house for a good minute. Ethan leaned over and said something. I didn't hear it, but I didn't have to. I knew that face, that tone. It's her. Then they drove off, but the tire dust they left behind clung to my ribs like smoke. That night, I sat in my living room, yellow light warming the hardwood floor, but for the first time since I moved in, I didn't feel safe. My phone buzzed. Mom, we need to talk. We'll come visit soon. I locked the screen. No reply. The texts kept coming. Soft ones. Sweetheart, I miss you. Casual ones. We're making your favorite stew. Sunday wanna come. Manipulative ones. Family is forever, Elena, no matter where you live. I didn't block her, not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd go, but in the back of my mind, one question had returned louder this time. Not if they'd find me, but what would I do when they did? It took them 2 weeks of awkward silence and ignored texts before Ethan finally called me directly. His name lit up my screen while I stood barefoot in the kitchen, a half-sliced peach in my hand, and the morning sun spilling across the floor. I stared at the name for a full minute. Then I picked up. Elena, he said, too cheerful, like we were kids again, and nothing had ever gone wrong. Listen, Mom's really upset. You've been avoiding us. Like she cried all night yesterday. I let the silence stretch. He paused, sensing I wasn't biting, then shifted gears, his voice softening as if rehearsed. Anyway, me and Claire are getting married. Did you hear spring ceremony? Backyard wedding? It's going to be beautiful. Mom and Dad are thrilled. I leaned against the counter, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Yeah, I said, I heard. You should come to dinner this Sunday, he said quickly, like it was nothing. The whole family will be there, just for fun, you know. We're still family, right? That word, family, it hit like a splinter, but I said yes. Part of me wanted to see how far they'd go. Another part needed to remind myself why I left. Sunday night, I pulled into the same cracked driveway I once thought would eventually welcome me home. But I was no longer the girl who thought love was something you could earn. Same white fence, same stone walkway. The old swing still dangled under the porch like some forgotten memory of joy. Linda opened the door. She hugged me a little too tight. You're so skinny, she said. Voice syrupy, eyes scanning my clothes like a price tag. Might fall out of them. Then she turned and walked toward the kitchen. No, how are you? No, we missed you. Ron gave me a nod. Barely, Ethan patted me on the back like we were co-workers, not siblings. His hand lingered too long, too firm. It wasn't affection. It was ownership. Dinner went exactly how I knew it would. Every word revolved around Ethan and Claire. The venue, the dress, the live band, the newly ordered champagne flutes etched with their initials. Dad even pulled out a swatch of fabric for the new curtains they planned to hang in the guest house. I ate slowly, smiled faintly, counted the minutes like I used to count pennies. Then, as dessert arrived, store-bought mini cheesecakes, because of course. It was Mom's busy week. Linda gently tapped her spoon against her glass. Clink, like a bell calling attention to the next act. I have something to say. She began, eyes locked on mine like I'd been summoned. Daniel and Claire are so excited about the wedding. She smiled, then sighed softly, playing the role. But, planning something proper and expanding the house for them to move in, it's all going to be quite expensive. I set my glass down. I already knew what was coming. My hands were steady, my face calm. And she continued, her voice sweetening, like she thought I wouldn't hear the manipulation underneath. Since you're doing so well, the family thought maybe you could help just a little. A beat, about $100,000 to build the garage, finish the new suite, and help with some wedding costs. Ron nodded, already settled in his role. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms folded, smiling like a prince addressing his court. Elena, he said, tone faux genuine. You get it? We're family. Helping each other when it matters should be a given, right? I looked at each of them and felt nothing but ice. So this was it. Not a word about where the money came from. No curiosity, no concern, just assumption, just entitlement. I inhaled once. Let the fury settle, not as fire, but as clarity. Family. I repeated softly. Where was this family when I was in college? When I worked 2 jobs and lived off instant noodles for months? When I cried myself to sleep in a leaky apartment because I couldn't afford groceries? No one spoke. I turned to Mom. What was it you told me back then? Something about no one stopping me from working harder? Her jaw tightened. Well, I said I did. I worked harder, but not so I could pay for the things you never valued in me. No one argued. No one apologized. They just sat there expecting me to break, to give in, like I always used to. I stood, picked up my purse. I used to hope you'd see me, I said, voice calm. I used to think I had to earn a place here, but I don't need it anymore. I turned to Ethan's smile. If you really want that garage, well, no one's stopping you from working harder. Then I walked out the front door, and this time I didn't look back. That night I drove home in silence. No music, no podcast, just the hum of tires on asphalt and the whisper of wind slipping through the crack in the window. In the rearview mirror, the glow of the house I grew up in blurred into nothing, a soft smear of memory I no longer owed anything to. But it wasn't just a physical departure, I had left something far more permanent behind. When I got home, I stepped out of my shoes, curled onto the living room couch, and let my head fall back. My breath came slow, steady, like I was exhaling years of trying, years of playing the role of good daughter in someone else's production. The relief didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly, a kind of stillness that wrapped around me like warm fabric. There was sadness, too, like closing a book you once loved but knew would never be kind to you again. But this time I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilty. I just breathed. And for the first time in over a decade, I wasn't a little girl chasing love like scraps under a dinner table. I was a woman who had stopped asking. The next morning, my phone lit up like a siren. Mom, what did you mean by that? I never treated you any differently. Family always comes first. You really hurt me, Elena. Ethan, I don't even know who you are anymore. We just needed a little help and you acted like a stranger. I read them. Then I calmly opened the drawer by the side table and dropped the phone in. Locked it. I had heard these lines all my life. The guilt, the gaslighting, the endless performative shock. Whenever I dared step out of the shadows they'd built for me. The only difference now, I didn't believe them anymore. I began living my days differently, on my terms. No alarms, no obligations. No ache in my chest from trying to prove I was good enough to be loved. Each morning I woke early, brewed fresh coffee, and sat on the front porch, with the sunlight pouring across the lawn. Like a blessing, I wrote. I even bought myself a ukulele, something I'd wanted in high school, but had been told was a waste of time. With Deborah's help, I began investing in small, heart-led projects, an eco-bookstore, a local art studio, a scholarship fund for girls in STEM. We spoke weekly, not just about assets and accounts, but about balance worth, and how healing sometimes sounds like silence. My home became warmer with each passing week. I planted more lavender along the fence, hung a small wooden swing beneath the backyard maple, built a towering bookshelf in the living room with titles I loved, not the ones I was told I should read. And slowly this house, this life became a quiet rebellion. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniably mine. Then one late fall afternoon, the doorbell rang. On the step, a white envelope. No name, no return address. Inside was a photo. Faded at the edges, me, Ethan, Mom, and Dad, taken on a long-forgotten trip to Lake Erie. I must have been 10. I was standing off to the side, half-cropped, half-forgotten. On the back written in Mom's neat cursive, "No matter where you are, home is still home." I stood there holding it expressionless. It didn't hurt. It didn't make me sad. It just didn't belong to me anymore. I folded it once neatly and placed it in the drawer beside the fireplace. I didn't tear it up, I didn't burn it, I didn't need to. Some goodbyes don't require noise. A week later, something remarkable happened. I received an email from the Columbus Children's Arts Collective, one of my short stories. Little Moon had been selected for illustration and featured in the New Voices Authors exhibit. My name would appear in the program. My words finally had found their own room in the world. I drove to the event alone. The road stretched endlessly, but my heart was light. Jazz played low on the stereo, and for once I wasn't running from anything. I was simply moving forward. At the gallery, no one clapped when I walked in. No one rushed to take my picture. There was no grand applause. But when I stood in front of the framed pages of Little Moon, inked with soft watercolors and wonder, I felt something truer than praise. I felt whole. Afterward, I slipped into a small cafe nearby, ordered chamomile tea, opened my leather notebook, and began jotting new ideas. Halfway through my third page, a girl no older than 8 approached me. "Are you the one who wrote Little Moon?" she asked, eyes wide. I smiled. "I am." She beamed. "I love that story. You're a really great writer." That single sentence, genuine, simple, undeservedly beautiful, settled in my chest like something sacred. I thanked her gently. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it felt like to be seen without strings, without performance. Not for being useful, not for being convenient, just for being... I no longer needed applause from people who never clapped for me. And for the first time, I didn't carry the weight of not enough. I carried something softer. The months that followed passed like a breeze after a long storm, cool, slow healing. My life wasn't extravagant. It didn't glitter, but it finally fit. Like a coat I'd spent years growing into. With Deborah's guidance, I invested in a few edtech startups run by women. Quiet revolutions disguised as businesses. I bought a small cabin tucked deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains, not for status, but for solitude. And I traveled not to escape, but to be. Mornings, sipping espresso on the cliffs of Big Sur. Afternoons, stretched out with books beneath sprawling Oregon oaks. Evenings, where I watched fireworks bloom like wildflowers over the river in Savannah. Not wondering who I was supposed to be, but just enjoying who I'd become. There was no more tightrope between guilt and survival. No more passive-aggressive texts about family or glances that said you owe us your happiness. I hadn't just walked away. I had grown beyond. My writing flourished. I poured myself into stories of little girls who built rocket ships from junkyard scraps, boys who spoke to stars through tin cans, and lonely creatures who found their voice in the quiet. My debut children's book launched with a small press in Chicago, and when the first printed copy arrived in the mail, I held it like something sacred. I didn't send it to my family, not out of spite, but because their praise no longer held weight. Success for once wasn't about being seen by people who never really looked. I filtered out every number I used to dread. Carol helped me move all personal contact into private channels, and those who truly cared. They were already here. A few new friends. A gentle illustrator I met at a book fair in Portland. A bookseller in Nashville who called my writing brave. Small, sincere connections. But the most important presence was my own. One crisp Saturday afternoon, I stopped by my favorite organic bakery in downtown Asheville. It was the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and fresh decisions. As I waited for my order, flipping through a notebook filled with rough story drafts, I heard it. A voice I hadn't expected in years. "Elena." I turned. Ethan stood there. Gray plaid shirt, slightly unshaven. The confident glint in his eyes had dulled, worn down like the edges of something once sharp. His mouth curled into a weak smile. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, glancing around. "You live nearby." I nodded, my face calm, voice even. Yeah, close. You? He shrugged. Just picking up pastries for Claire. She's pregnant again, our second. The way he said it wasn't joyful, it was tired. There was a pause. That awkward, slow-burning space where people try to find footing in a conversation they don't belong in. Mom still talks about you all the time, he added quietly. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He let the silence stretch, then spoke again, softer now. Sometimes I think this world just isn't fair. I tilted my head. My voice was steady, not cold, not cruel, just the truth. I agree, I said. Life isn't fair, but I learned how to make it fair for myself. He looked like he wanted to argue, like something in his bones still believed he was owed more than what I had claimed for myself, but no words came. And in that silence, something passed between us, not forgiveness, not closure, but clarity. He knew. He knew I was no longer the girl who smiled through dinner. While he soaked up praise meant for two, I wasn't waiting to be rescued or asked to belong. I had outgrown the box they built for me. A bakery employee called my name and handed me the warm bag. I nodded, thanked her, then turned back to Ethan. I really do wish you the best, I said with a softness that came not from love, but from freedom. I mean that. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. And I walked away. Not in anger, not to prove anything, but because I no longer owed the past my presence. The late sun painted gold across the sidewalk, and I moved through it slowly, steadily, light. I didn't need to win, I just needed to live. That night, I sat on my porch with a warm mug of chamomile in hand, the steam curling up toward a sky scattered with stars. The air was cool, laced with the soft rustle of the lavender I'd planted months ago, small, stubborn things that bloomed anyway. I looked up, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small beneath the vastness. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who stood in the corners of her own life, shrinking herself to fit inside the space her family allowed. The one who believed she was a broken version of something brighter, of someone like Ethan. But I know better now. I was never less. I was just unseen. Unseen until I saw myself. The truth is, life is unfair. It hands out love unevenly, opportunity sparingly, and recognition only when you've bled for it. But I stopped waiting for life to make it right. I made it right. And the freedom I've built, the peace I hold in both hands now, no one can take that from me. From a girl forgotten at the dinner table, to a woman who writes her own story, this is my becoming. Have you ever had to walk away from people who refuse to see your worth? What would your life look like if you stopped asking for permission to be happy? Share your story in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it. And if you want more true to the bone stories like this, stories that stir something deep in your chest, comment 6 below and we'll bring you the next one, real raw and just like yours.